Happy Friday and welcome to the Bulwark podcast. Tim Miller. Boy, it's been a while, Tim. Welcome back to the Weekend Podcast.
It's been
Appreciate
too
it.
long, Charlie. I've missed your dulcet tones. I've been getting tweets from people. Where's Tim?
I
Where
know.
where are you? Are you and Charlie fighting? Is there a feud happening? There's been some gossip floating around.
Is
So
this
I'm
true?
happy just
Really?
to I'm happy to bring an end to all this. I'm just
Oh,
telling you what's in my DM inbox. I don't know what
oh, man.
you're getting, but I'm getting a lot of people just sliding into the DMs saying, I need my fix.
Yeah, no, I got nothing. I,
I think it's a simple answer. I was just chosen over Tom Nichols, or Tom Nichols was just chosen over me last week. That's fine. It was just a head-to-head competition. You were like, you know what? I was looking at the ratings, and Tom gets it by a nose. I think it's as
no,
simple as that, which is fine. I can take it.
believe it or not, it does not actually work this way. Okay, so at the very top of this show, I want to acknowledge that I made a mistake in my morning newsletter. I got something wrong, and I need to clarify it. This is it's my piece about the revenge of Dark MAGA. People have heard about this, or maybe not. This is Madison Cawthorn's rant, where he basically says that he's now on a mission to expose those who say and promise one thing yet legislate and work toward another self-profiteering globalist goal. It is time for this. He actually wrote this. It is time for Dark MAGA to take command. We have an enemy to defeat, blah, 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 but we can't defeat them until we defeat the cowardly and weak members of our own party. Their days are numbered. We are coming. Which I thought was a bold play for a guy who just lost his own primary with less than a third of the vote. But whatever. He's been watching too many Batman movies. But the mistake that I made was I mocked his typo where he wrote, "The time for Gentile politics as usual has come to an end." And I wrote, because I'm naive, I wrote the typo, presumably he meant gentle, was interesting because it's unlikely that the 26-year-old soon-to-be ex-congressman meant to call for a more robust Jewish politics. In fact, he's corrected it, and he didn't, when he wrote Gentile, he did not mean gentle. He was going for genteel. And I apologize for the mistake. So,
Are we sure that it wasn't a commentary about how the Gentiles need to rally together a little more against against the Jews?
well, he
Are
just,
we 100% sure that there
well,
wasn't like a little bit of a undertone there?
yeah, it's like,
Maybe Occam's razors. He's just an
yeah,
idiot. I don't know.
he's typing away, and there's space lasers and Rothschilds, and he's deleting it and some of the stuff, but the Gentiles stayed in. I don't know. I thought it was interesting, for people who are wondering what is Dark MAGA, not to be confused with original MAGA. Dark MAGA obviously is darker, and represents the purification. It is like the return to the true faith that Madison Cawthorn and his
Blood
allies,
atonement.
something like that. And I thought it was interesting. He provided a list of his fellow dark MAGA folks. And as I wrote in my newsletter, I said, it's everything you hope it would be. I mean, the lunatics, the grifters, the conspiracy theorists, the white nationalists, all the crackpots, white supremacists, Darren Beattie, and of course, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is his words, the great Charlie Kirk, complete nut job Wendy Rogers, who's just an insane state senator from Arizona. Let's see here. Of course, the former president of the United States. That almost goes without saying, right? Joe Cant, who's running for Congress, and talk about being out anyway. So, but he's provided.
He's the one I wrote that article about, where he humiliated himself in front of the dorm room Nazis. Remember this? And he did he did like a Zoom interview because he was upset that there was like this little group of, so that you have not to get too much into for our listeners into the Kremlinology of the online Nazis, but you have the Groypers, which are your more mainstream online Nazis, and then they've got another group that has sort of spun off, the American Populist Union, and it's the anti-immigrant, all of the Christian nationalism teens, almost all white teens, of course, and Joe. They were mad at Joe because of some kind of indecipherable internal feud, and Joe was worried since he sees that as his base, and so he subjected himself to a like 1.5 hour interview with a kid who, I mean, if he was 15, he was a day, and where, you know, he got asked questions like, "Aren't the whites being discriminated against?" Et cetera, et cetera. It's
Yes.
if you didn't enjoy my article, this is like 2 months ago.
I
You should
do
go
I
see
do
it.
remember
That
that.
just gives you a sense for who makes the dark MAGA list. This is like what you have to do to get on the list.
He subjected himself to an inquisition over the charge of that you are insufficiently neo-Nazi.
Yeah,
And
basically.
he's trying to prove, "No, no, no, I'm going along with virtually everything." And, Madison Cawthorn, when he lists his dark MAGA friends, has Joe Kent's name, Joe Kent, parentheses, "whom I endorse wholeheartedly." Okay, that's just like, I am totally into that, so don't have any ambiguity about this. This is the kind of guy that I am talking about. Okay, so there's one thing about the Madison Cawthorn. I mean, we've talked about it. Ad infinitum. But the one thing that kind of surprised me on Tuesday night, I don't know if it surprised you too, that Madison Cawthorn conceded. He acknowledged that he lost. I mean, that's kind of a cuck move, isn't it?
It
I
is.
didn't. I didn't
Yeah.
know. I didn't know that MAGA folks, much less dark MAGA folks, ever admitted they lost.
Yeah, well, I've kind of also admit an error myself, Charlie. Just like yours, it seems I think was maybe a more understandable your newsletter error than what I'm about to confess to. But I, you know, on Wednesday morning, the nicer part of my angels, you know, were sort of singing inside my soul, and on the Next Level podcast for Bulwark Plus members, which is usually just a little bit more of a ribald podcast than we offer for the non-members. I got soft, and Madison had
Mm.
lost, and I just read that Politico article that was genuinely sad and about just his mental health crisis following losing the use of his legs, and I was also a little bit riled up by the fact that like the Republican base had come for him for like, wearing a blouse or whatever. And that, this wasn't really exactly a victory for the forces of good. It was mostly like Republicans taking out somebody that annoyed them, by gay baiting. And so I didn't love that. And so I was feeling a little defensive of young Madison and, kind of was wishing him the best and thinking, well, maybe he'll go get some therapy, maybe he'll find something in his life, find some meaning in his life, and move forward. And I don't know what the fuck I was thinking.
Yeah. Well, it's Friday. You got
I
over
mean,
it.
it
You,
was
you got over.
helpful. It was nice. I was being nice, but I mean, look at this guy. I mean, it is just obvious that he was not going to do that and was going to continue down literally the dark path and brand it as the dark path. No subtlety. But as far as the loss, I do think that there is something to the fact that the heat was getting pretty hot on him, and I don't know if you read that Michael Cruz political article, which was really
I
really
did. I
excellent.
did. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It sounded like a guy who was kind of ready for the heat to turn off a little bit, and so maybe that doesn't mean that he was ready for therapy and ready to go devote himself to serving others or whatever. But I do think it might have meant I'm gonna start. People are gonna stop bugging me as much if I just become Charlie Kirk 2.0, rather than have actual responsibilities, and I think that's probably related to why you didn't why you conceded.
This will probably come as a shock to you, but I actually get your reaction because I'd read that same piece, and then in which he's a deeply troubled, obviously broken kid who was thrust into something that he was completely not prepared for, um, and there, you know, in the back of my mind, I was thinking Tuesday night that maybe when he conceded that. Maybe he was a little bit relieved that he's not going to have that kind of a spotlight, and then maybe the best thing that ever happened to him was that he has a chance to step back from all of this stuff and maybe heal and
Yeah.
forget forget that
Well,
shit. I
I
mean,
don't know about healing. No, it doesn't feel like healing's
no,
happening.
it does not feel like that. That's going to be put on hold for a while, folks. Okay, so I want to do something a little bit different this morning because I am a huge fan, as you know, of your not my party Snapchat show. How do you describe it? I mean,
So, once a week, and it's 4 minutes, and, it's kind of I always get the person wrong. This shows you, this is why I
mm,
can relate to the Snapchat audience because I always forget the difference between Mickey Rooney and Andy Rooney. I think it's Andy Rooney.
oh,
Remember at the
yeah,
end of
yeah,
60 Minutes, he
yes,
did
Andy.
the little 2 minute. I always kind of think of this as, a little less grumpy, updated version of that where you have just memes and little jokes sprinkled in, a 2 to 3 minute commentary on, what's happening in our lives and politics these days. And it's meant for I'm happy if everybody likes it, but it's really meant for Generation Z, the Zoomers, who are not like following this, politics, cable news, and Twitter minute by minute. Like that's just not who this is for. Some of it's somewhat for. I know those people can want to watch it too. That's fine, but it's more for that kind of crowd. How can I give them a little injection of reality and real talk into the news to people who are like mostly consuming news from like insane partisan, social media sites that just get injected into their various, TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat feeds, and try to provide them, a little bit of real talk with some humor, 3 to 4 minutes a week. How's that description?
What's interesting is, of course, is the average viewer of cable TV, the reader of political websites is well north of 60 years old, and I sort of have the image of you have a lot of like 17-year-olds watching this. Is that true?
So we're it has 150,000 subscribers. It gets six-figure views every week, and about
Yeah.
half of the subscribers are 17 to 24. Some are even younger.
Huh.
So
This
yeah,
can be
no, the
done.
median audience is a college kid. Yeah.
Okay, so I think, and I'm not trying to pull your chain here.
Yep.
The art of this is that it is very, very fast moving. The visuals are very, very entertaining. It is often funny, but you make a very, very serious point in
Yeah.
each and every one of them. They are not dumbed down. So what I want to do is I want to play the Not My Party that you dropped yesterday about the radicalization of angry white men, and you're missing a lot when you don't see the visuals. But I think you'll get a flavor of what Tim's Not My Party looks like. So, and I want to talk about it on the other side because this is still the week. It is Friday. We're only a few days after the latest horrific domestic terrorism episode. And this country is reacting very differently to domestic terrorism than we did to previous moments of terrorism. But let's play this. You can find this on the Bulwark site. You can find this on Snapchat. But here's the audio version.
You're being replaced, and there's nothing you can do about it. So shut up.
A mass shooting killed at least 10 people, which investigators believe was a hate crime.
This is Not My Party. Brought to you by The Bulwark. The tragedy in Buffalo is the latest deadly reminder that the era of the extremely online extremist is upon us.
I started to build this hateful mindset. I'm just going out there and killing people.
These young men were radicalized, not by religious clerics or cult leaders, but by message board messiahs who cloaked their radical ideology in memes. The 18-year-old who carried out the latest white supremacist mass murder left no doubt that's exactly what led him to do it. He wrote in his 180-page manifesto that the idea for the attack came online. Browsing RPaul one day, I saw a short gif of a man walking into a building and shooting a shotgun through a dark hallway. That man was the perpetrator of the massacre at 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, which he live-streamed on Facebook.
Nearly 200 watched his murderous attack live, with many quickly replicating and sharing the footage.
The Buffalo shooter says he then began researching Christchurch and developed his beliefs mostly on the internet, where he learned about the Great Replacement theory, which posits that shadowy forces, usually Democrats or Jews, are plotting to replace white European ethnoculture by importing minorities with higher fertility rates.
Jesus fucking Christ.
This replacement ideology has flourished in online forums like 8chan and Gab and Parler, where racist blog boys post dehumanizing memes that they often pretend are jokes when called on it.
Irony is so important for giving a lot of cover and plausible deniability for our views.
Extremism expert J.J. McNabb calls it a new world of ironic killers. They say things that are outrageous, that they don't necessarily believe at first, but over time, they come to believe it.
There might be mental illness here.
This ironic pose has another benefit. It gives their racist views the cover they need to seep into mainstream political discourse. I saw this up close in 2016 when Donald Trump quote-tweeted an online troll named White Genocide TM to attack my boss, Jeb Bush. White Genocide, like Great Replacement, posits that the white race is being exterminated by interracial marriages like that of Jeb and his wife Kalumba. These bigots claim that white people who participate in this genocide are race traitors, or cuckolds who like to imagine their spouses getting banged by foreigners. Now, these online Nazis do seem to spend a lot of time thinking about black and brown dicks.
That makes so much sense.
Just saying, for a presidential candidate to tweet someone with a view as insane as white genocide was unprecedented.
Should have ended that day. Evil was allowed to endure.
But Trump got away with it because it was just Twitter. So we all moved on to the next thing. But these viral moments help the extremists get new eyeballs. So does Tucker Carlson, who has repeatedly aired segments with alt-right provocateurs advancing great replacement ideology.
In political terms, this policy is called the Great Replacement. The country's being stolen from American citizens.
Tucker sucks.
Tucker's connection to meme culture was no accident. His head writer was outed for posting on racist forums like this one about jet black Congo N-words. Carlson has spawned imitators and outlets that appeal to young conservatives, like this from the Daily Wire.
They want to replace white male voters with voters who they think are going to be beholden to them. It's just a fact.
And then you have the Groypers, a bunch of campus KKK virgins who take the trolling offline.
Dating women is gay.
It can be.
The result is a bunch of entry points for angry young white men who are ripe to be radicalized.
I don't really have much to lose in my life at this point.
They come for the lulz, but stay for the surround sound of rage juice that tells them that they are the victim of modern woke culture. And the most unstable among them get convinced that their only choice is to act. From Christchurch to Charleston to El Paso to Buffalo, we've seen the deadly result, which is why we cannot dismiss their lulz as some stupid internet game. I'd like to close this week by remembering the people who were the victims of this latest racist attack.
Wow, Tim, that's outstanding stuff.
Thank you.
And I think it's encouraging to know that young people are listening to that you're getting through to a completely different audience.
Yeah, that's really why I wanted to focus on the meme and the Reddit and the 8chan and 4chan element of this, right? Because I think that even younger people, I see this myself. Like to get real, I look back on, I went to an all boys high school, where we, said, at times racist jokes for like the laughs, right? Like, and we were like, we're not really. It's just this is just to trigger people, right? Like, it was just bratty, prep school kid BS. And I think that there are people that watch this show because I get feedback, from people who are, conservative that watch it, younger guys that are mostly men that are conservative that watch it, but aren't quite sure about the MAGA stuff and are very, I think that are potentially could fall on either side of the line, right? Onto the dark MAGA Madison side of the line, or kind of be brought, into the light, so to speak. And I think that you can understand how even a reasonable 17-year-old would say to themselves, "Oh, this meme, this is just funny, right?
Right.
Like this is just horseplay, right? Like
Right.
we're just fucking around and." Oh, I'm triggering my teachers, or I'm triggering the kids on campus, the snowflakes, who get all way too upset about this stuff, and you can see why they appealed. They listen to Joe Rogan and Barstool, right? And I'm trying to talk to that crew because there's a lot of people that are persuadable that I think reasonably, are young enough to have not seen the real life impact of some
Right.
of this, or live in communities that are not that diverse, like when I grew up in, so they don't have the experience of learning from people about what it feels like to be on the opposite end of this kind of stuff. And so I think that's why I just really wanted to focus on this, because I think that it gets lost, and you see it all the way up to, it's not just kids, by the way. You see this all the way up through the conservative media ecosystem, where there's apology after apology for this kind of stuff, as it's just a joke, it's just a troll, we're just trying to own the libs, we're just trying to trigger people. And for people who have fully formed brains, maybe that's fine, they can process that stuff, but you're not thinking about the unstable people, the aggrieved, the young folks who don't have a support system in their lives, who are looking at all this, and it, as JJ McNabb said in the piece, they start with the jokes, but eventually they start to believe it. They start to buy into all of it, and if we're in a society with our guns everywhere, it's not that surprising that a certain percentage of them act on it.
Well, that's right. Now, you use the word apology, and I don't want people to misunderstand that, because there is no apology. Nobody on the right is apologizing for these racist memes. In fact, what they're doing is they're finding ways to rationalize it and justify it. Like,
right.
Well, actually, this is true. This is what the Democrats are saying. So I was struck by the fact that almost all the Republicans in the House of Representatives voted against a bill toughening the stance on domestic terrorism yesterday. Because you and I are both old enough to remember when the Republicans were the tough on terrorism folks.
Yeah.
We remember the response to 9/11. The bill that was up yesterday was actually not that robust. I mean, it didn't create a new crime or anything. It basically just sort of established an office, a domestic terrorism office in the Department of Justice and Homeland Security, FBI, and called for reports, et cetera, and monitoring. And 203 Republicans voted against this yesterday. And here's the twist: virtually the same bill was up in the House back in 2020, and it passed on a unanimous voice vote. So, what's happening here? How have the how has the Republican Party gone so soft on terrorism?
I wish I had a better answer than just racism, Charlie, honestly. But I mean, I think that it is just much more simple to blame the other, to blame Muslims, to say that there's something fundamentally flawed about Muslim ideology that we need to root out, radical Islamic ideology, if you will, that needs to be rooted out, than there is to say, we need to clean this up in our own house. Like, do we have to say this? Like the
Yeah,
Capitol was sacked. The
I know.
Capitol was stormed like last year, right? And I just don't know what more needs to happen to wake these people up. And I think it's hard to come up with any defense of it that is rational. I think that what they would say is that they're concerned about overreach, and targeting of conservatives with speech. And I think that there's a fair concern about overreach. There was obviously overreach after 9/11. I think it's still pretty ridiculous that, my grandma is, having to take off her shoes when she goes through the airport right now, 22 years later, right? And just as one example, like there was overreach, no doubt. And so, I think if we were in a normal time where you had adults like that were able to discuss in the house and debate and say, okay, well, what are some kind of restrictions that could be put in place that go too far, and what isn't far enough. That's not, as you said, that's how it's happening. It was barely, this legislation was not exactly, a great threat to civil liberties like some of the stuff that we saw after 9/11. But the Republicans can't give an inch because the reality is that they see these extremists as being part and parcel of the types of people that show up to MAGA rallies, and so they don't want to be seen as complicit in investigating people that are in their own side, and that's just real talk.
It is real talk, and the reality is that, we do have an uptick in the body count of domestic terrorism, and I was on, I think it was Nicole Wallace's show yesterday, and really struck by, the contrast between the reaction to these episodes of domestic terrorism compared to, say, 9/11 when the country came together, and Republicans certainly decided that they were gonna, plant their flag, and, you had to call radical Islamic terrorism, and now it's like, "Yeah, no." So I look, should we give some more free and completely unwelcome advice, or can I here?
Oh, please.
If Democrats are not completely brain dead in their messaging, this should be a huge issue in the midterm elections, just like Democratic opposition to the Department of Homeland Security was in the 2002 midterm elections. I mean, it's one thing, you're right, by the way, about racism, but there's, sort of a limited effectiveness in just simply saying racist, racist, racist,
Sure,
racist,
sure, sure.
which I understand, white nationalists, white supremacists. But if you really want to hurt Republicans, go at them on their strengths. Say, you guys are squishy on law and order. You have gone squishy on terrorism. You have flip flopped on terrorism. This is a reality. And, I was thinking about, why they wouldn't have just simply voted in favor of all of this with, how deadly these attacks have been. And I think maybe there's like a guilty consciousness that if they took an aggressive position on this, that it might ensnare some of their allies and they might be held accountable for some of their own rhetoric. And so when they voted, I think they created a pretty powerful record. If Democrats could ever, ever, ever figure out how to turn this around, because no Republican, back home is really worried about being called a racist anymore. I'm sorry to say that. And then, by the way, I'm exaggerating, but they are worried about being accused of being soft on terrorism, soft on law and order, not backing the blue. These are potential wedge issues. And I think that the Republicans have found themselves sort of trapped by their just being against everything.
Yeah, two more just data points on this.
Yeah.
So one is just I think the best support for our explanation for that this is why Republicans are not going along with this is the Tucker Carlson documentary, that caused Hayes and Goldberg to leave the Fox, right? I mean, this documentary was basically paralleling the Patriot Act to modern day, and Tucker was saying that the Democrats want to create a Patriot Act that targets conservatives instead, that parallels, what was put in place after 9/11. And that was the main thrust of this documentary. I think that fear of that, of being accused of that and of having a backlash among the base over that is driving these votes. Nobody wants to get yelled on Tucker Carlson. I want to make just one other just analogy.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
use 9/11. 9/11 is kind of the easy analogy, but how
Yeah.
about, I think a better parallel is what about something like San Bernardino,
Yep.
right?
Okay, fair.
I'm going from memory here, so somebody
Right.
correct me if my Google is wrong. But I believe that the impetus for the Muslim ban originally was San Bernardino, or was another one of the less deadly attacks than 9/11, right? But that if you remember this, there's a series of kind of one-offs, domestic terrorist attacks that were pushed by people who are influenced by radical Islam. And after each one of those, there was just this overwhelming response about Republicans. Like, what are we going to do? How can we crack down on this more? How can we fight it more? And, obviously the end of that, road of the Patriot Act and all these other laws was the Muslim ban, and said, we need to stop letting Muslims come into this country until we can figure out what's going on. That's how extreme it was. So I think that a parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is that, it was the San Bernardino?
You are right. I'm looking this up right now. So Trump official justifies travel ban. This is 2017 by citing the 2015 mass shooting in San Bernardino, California. So yeah, Trump and his aides keep justifying that.
We need to ban Muslims. After Buffalo, silence. We need to do nothing. That's very
That's
telling.
good. That is very telling. Okay, so even more telling, and I want to just talk about this in a moment. We're talking about the Great Replacement theory because all these dots now connect. This is not a spoof. This is not an exaggeration. CPAC is actually meeting in Viktor Orban's Hungary today. The Conservative Political Action Conference, whatever, it used to be this, the beating heart of the right-wing id, actually went to Hungary. And I want to talk about that right after this. Hey, gang, I just wanted to drop in to say thank you for joining me here each weekday. And also, I want to give a shout out to our Bulwark Plus members who help to underwrite this show and keep everything we do at the Bulwark sustainable. You might think that a Bulwark Plus membership is all about our newsletters like my daily morning shots, but really, Bulwark Plus membership is about a lot more than that. We're building a community of independent minded, concerned patriots who value democracy and the truth. We make most of what we do free and accessible by everybody because you can't help save democracy from behind a paywall. But we do have some great member-only benefits that I'd like to share with you. Because in addition to our newsletters, members have commenting privileges and also have access to ad-free versions of this show and all of the podcasts in the Bulwark Network, like Sarah Longwell's Focus Group podcast and Mona Charon's show, Beg to Differ. And there's the Thursday Night Bulwark, a live video broadcast that we host for members each week on Zoom. You can give Bulwark Plus membership a try for the next 30 days for free. Simply go to thebulwark.com/Charlie to claim your free trial today. That's thebulwark.com/Charlie. Thanks. We are back with Tim Miller. Every time I see this, Tim, I have to sort of like double check, like, no, this isn't a spoof, right? Did Matt Schlapp really take CPAC to Hungary to kiss up to the authoritarian, fascist adjacent strongman of Hungary, Viktor Orban? Are they actually doing this right now at the moment that the Ukrainians are fighting for their lives and their freedom? And the answer is yes, they are. Yes, they did.
Yeah, and just this week, to your point before the spot there, Orban, gave a speech that pushed out the Great Replacement theory. And he was talking about how the left and the globalists are trying to use the literal word replacement of our culture. And so, here we have a man that is, was cracking down on gays and transgender people in Hungary. So we have our parallel to our "Don't Say Gay" bill, our Florida. Like, here's a man who has been, I think, the weakest member of the EU in their response to the deadly and brutal massacre that Putin has been putting forth in Ukraine and Mariupol and elsewhere. And here's somebody that is advocating the Great Replacement theory right after the Buffalo domestic terrorist attack, and there's no even attempt to put the slightest pinky finger between the domestic Republican conservative movement and these guys, and it's not even as if they're going over there and saying, well, I think Orban has offered this element of nationalism, which I admire. I'm a little bit concerned about, the way that he's manipulated the media or the way that he's cozied up to Putin. I mean, we can see, we'll watch, there'll be speech after speech today through this weekend. I'm not expecting a lot of distancing from somebody. And it's because Orban, and they're being explicit about this, is the model. A quasi kind of deformed version of Christian nationalism that cracks down on gays, being more friendly to authoritarian governments elsewhere, being just very harshly and cruelly anti-immigrant in ways that have racist overtones. The Republican Party of today is completely in line with this. And this is where, I think when we talk about the big picture stuff, we always talk about in this podcast about what has changed in the party and what's the same. Like, we're a long way from the days where Tony Blair is our closest ally.
Yeah, no kidding.
That is it is a notable difference in approach, and there's not any like meaningful pushback within the coalition.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It was just a few years ago. I mean, CPAC has always been sort of this, the Star Wars bar scene of the conservative movement. I'm certainly not going to, posit that there was a time of, great principle insanity. However, it was just a few years ago that Mona Charen, our colleague Mona Charen, appeared at a CPAC forum and spoke truth to power. Do you remember this? When she called out Donald Trump and had to be escorted by security from the room because people were so angry about it. But my guess is that there will be no Mona Charens in Budapest speaking truth to power about Viktor Orban, will there? There will be no one who stands up for liberal democracy, constitutional democracy, pushes back against authoritarianism. Will not happen. Okay, so I don't want to get diverted here, but you mentioned how Viktor Orban has emerged as the model, which I find to be somewhat baffling until you spend time, listening to some of the Nat Khans, the Steve Bannons of the world. What is the attraction of Vladimir Putin? What is the attraction of Viktor Orban? And it does almost inevitably come back to their opposition to gay rights. And the obsession with this, something that I think many Americans have thought we've kind of like, okay, we settled that, we've moved on. As I pointed out, we were discussing this yesterday on my podcast with Kim Whaley. I think people need to remember that until 2003, less than 20 years ago, states were free to criminalize gay sex. I mean, it was only in 2003 that the Supreme Court recognized the constitutional protection of sexual privacy. And when it did that, again, 2003, not that long ago, it did so over the fierce objections of conservative judges like Antonin Scalia. So, you wonder, in terms of the culture war, as the culture war ramps up and as the embrace of folks like Viktor Orban intensifies, I think it's naive not to think that that's going to be a new and very dangerous front, which I'm sure you know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. This is a clear front. I think some of the slippery slope SCOTUS arguments around Roe are a little silly and kind of missing the ball. But I will say this. It's just worth remembering. I mean, John Roberts was on the other side of Obergefell against, right? So the current makeup of the court, I mean, there's decent reason to believe that there would be 6 votes against Obergefell if this was the court that had reviewed it 10 years ago. Now, because of cultural mores and other, is anybody really going to challenge it? I think there are a lot of reasons to not be concerned about that. But look, I think that's a fair worry, and I think that people that are mocking those who have that reasonable worry are doing so in bad faith. And then as far as the culture war attack, look, I do think that overall, there's a new Morning Consult poll. I don't know if it's out yet, but I did an interview for this article. There has not been a backslide among the public on gay rights, right? And the public is generally favorable, towards gay rights and continues to be moving more and more favorably towards gay rights. And that is why I think that the danger here is you see these very narrow fights, right? Like we're going to demonize them in schools. We're going to go in Republican legislatures and like the very concerning one in Louisiana and basically put don't ask, don't tell for teachers in. And so I think that, obviously the trans fights, transports, all these sorts of areas. So I think that's where the fight is going. I think Republicans have a potential danger that they're kind of getting. I think if you listen to DeSantis's messaging on this, and compare it to, what the craziest state legislator is saying, like you see a difference in strategy where DeSantis is one that is savvy and, the crazy side of the party, old DeSantis is on the crazy side of the party, but the
Yeah.
less savvy version of the crazy is moving Republicans in a bad direction on this against public opinion. But there are enough areas, where they're on stable political turf, at least in the short term, that this is definitely a fight that's going to continue to come. It's not just a passing fancy.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit because I have not had a chance to talk with you since you wrote your In Fuego piece about Chuck Schumer. You suggesting that Chuck Schumer is not the legislative genius. I'm sorry, I have to laugh about all this. But your headline was Chuck Schumer is on the cusp of butt fumbling the Biden agenda. So before we get into this, could you define butt fumbling for me?
It was a famous fumble by the New York Jets quarterback, Mark Sanchez, where he received the hike
Yeah.
from the center and then fumbled the ball against the butt, against
Mhm.
his own butt. And so it's sort of like worse than like a more embarrassing version of a fumble, a butt fumble. Just a little bit of flair, a little bit of right early flair.
I think that every team has its legendary worst play ever, and if you're around Packer fans, just mention the name T.J. Rubley. I'm just setting that aside here. Okay, so let's talk about this. I mean, how are the Democrats doing, Tim?
They're doing bad.
Yeah.
And so I've been listening to your podcast, so I've not been invited on.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
I know there's been
jeez.
plenty of discussion of the of all the stupid messaging votes. So we can just put that aside for a
Yeah.
second. I want to focus on the agenda because this is the most frustrating part for me. And sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who's screaming about this. Jonathan Chait wrote about this yesterday, so I'm not totally alone. We have an ally there, and Chait expanded on my attack on Schumer to include the number 2 in the Senate, Dick Durbin, who was quoted by Politico as basically saying that he's giving up on reconciliation and he's tired
Oh,
and that he worked really. I don't have the exact quote in front of me,
yeah.
but it's basically I worked so hard on this and now I'm tired and I'm just giving up. It's like you have one job. What do you mean you're tired? And this is the frustrating thing. So for people who are not, as keyed into all of the various parliamentary procedures of Washington. Just a quick background. There's a rule called reconciliation that has there are certain limits around it. One example is you can only do it one time per year. You can only do it on budget neutral bills. But what it allows you to do is pass legislation with only 50 votes, 50 plus one. And as opposed to the 60. And while Democrats in other contexts are obsessed about this, they're like, we got to kill the filibuster. We got to kill the filibuster. Well, reconciliation gives you kind of a one-time get out of jail free card on the filibuster on only bills related to the budget, right? So you can't do it for voting rights, which is stupid. But anyway, you can do it on bills based on the budget. So the Democrats were going to use their reconciliation on their big BBB bill. Obviously, BBB has been killed, but they still have their get out of filibuster free card. And reconciliation has been used. It was used to pass the Trump tax cuts. It was used to do part of Obamacare. It's really kind of complicated to get into, but Obamacare wouldn't have been fully passed if it wasn't for reconciliation. Both Bush tax cuts, all of the major pieces of budget legislation of my adult life have been used through reconciliation. They only get this one card. And the Biden administration needs to use reconciliation to get at least some part of Biden's agenda passed besides infrastructure. And Chuck and Durbin seem to have given up on this. Like they couldn't get BBP passed, so we want nothing. And it's like this is crazy. They could go into the election year and pick something popular. I literally don't care what it is, Democrats. I don't care. It could be prescription drug costs, something that addresses the costs in people's lives. It could be child care. It could be elder care. They could throw in some climate stuff, and you can put together a package
that has one or two things that you can campaign on and say, costs are going up for you. The Republicans are blocking this. I want to give you cheaper childcare. I want to give you cheaper prescription drug costs, and we're going to pay for it by jacking up taxes a little bit on people above $500,000 a year. Bing, bang, boom. Like, this is an easy deal. And all they need to do is get Manchin and Sinema to come to the table on it. And they seem to have just given up. And instead, what they're doing is holding idiotic message bills on the Senate floor that
which are
aren't
terrible.
even advancing a message that harms Republicans. It's like what? How are they spending their days? How are they spending their days? Why is Dick Durbin tired? What else does he have to do? They can't get 60 votes on anything. Like, Republicans aren't going to vote for anything. This is all they have to do.
Since we're working on analogies here, it's a little bit like having a winning lottery ticket in your pocket, and somebody goes, "Hey, Tim, where are you going to go cash in that lottery ticket? I hear you just won $100 million." And you go, "Yeah, it's just too much hassle. I'm gonna take a nap." I mean, what? You have a fucking lottery ticket. You have won. You have this one thing to do, and they can't do it.
We need the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory song. I got the golden ticket. Yeah, they got it.
Well, I mean, at some point, and I think you've written this, you just go and say to Kirsten Sinema and to Joe Manchin, just write on a piece of paper what you'd vote for, and we'll do that. Right? I mean,
Right.
I know it's, AOC will be all upset about it and everything. I mean, this is kind of the problem, is that the Democratic Party is this just completely unwieldy coalition. And you think back on all of the irrational exuberance early on when they had like a 3-vote margin in the House and a tie Senate, and everybody's going, well, okay, it's the New Deal all over again. He's, Joe Biden is going to be FDR. And it's like, no, that was, I don't know, what's stronger than delusional and wish casting? What can I go beyond that? Hallucinatory?
Superlative of delusional? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just really quick, one thing before you switch up, because I want to
Yep,
throw this
yep.
out there. They could also call Lisa Murkowski. I know, let's
Yeah.
not be crazy here. I mean, maybe Lisa Murkowski wouldn't vote for anything, but Lisa Murkowski is running as an independent in Alaska, right? She's going to need some Democratic votes. Might Lisa Murkowski want to vote for something that's very popular, like cutting prescription drug costs and giving parents a little bit of a break on childcare costs and only raising taxes on extremely wealthy people? Lisa Murkowski might be for that. Maybe she wouldn't. I don't know. But are they trying? I literally don't think that they're trying. I don't have any evidence that they're trying. And I used to think that behind the scenes they were trying. And I just wasn't
No.
hearing about it all the way out here in Oakland. And then these articles came out the last few weeks where they were like, yeah, well, we're just waiting on Joe Manchin. What do you mean you're just waiting on Joe Manchin? Like, what? Like, really? You can't find. This is all, think about popularism. This is all popular stuff. Like, you don't have to do the 6 trillion. You could just pick one or two things that people like. It's, I don't know, crazy idea.
For people who didn't catch that word, popularism is the radical idea that you should do popular things. You should put popular issues up for a vote. And for people, look, I do not think that you are unreasonable in saying that, reach across the aisle. I understand, that most Republicans are going to vote no on a lot of things, but there have been certain votes that indicate that if you do the wheeling and the dealing and you make some compromises, you can make some progress. I think part of the pattern has been that they don't even bother to do that. So they put up very, very partisan bills, and then every Republican feels free to vote against them. No Republican feels that they are on the defensive by voting against them, and it does not divide the Republican caucus at all. And so, for example, with all the talk about, democracy is on the ballot, I keep thinking about the strategy of putting HR 1 up, which was basically, a wish list. The folks from, the Brennan Center said, no, we don't need to do these other things. We should push this big bill. And it turns out that was completely unpassable. So they went for it all. And I don't know what plan B is.
They don't seem to have one.
Yeah, well, that's it. That pattern again and again and again. Do you want to get something done or not? Do you want to satisfy, this particular lefty group, or do you actually want to pass legislation that might make a difference? And this decision is up again and again. Okay, so can we just do a little bit of role reversal here? Because I want to actually say something positive about Joe Biden.
Great.
I think that over time, the one thing that Biden is getting right, I think, is his handling of Ukraine. I've been very skeptical, as you know. I have been critical of his caution. And again, he's not the most nimble character in the world, but he has stepped up on the global stage in a way that I think is increasingly impressive. And the bill that was passed just yesterday, I mean, for all the griping, that $40 billion aid package, the Lend-Lease package, the huge bipartisan majorities for all of this, his strong stand endorsing Sweden and Finland joining NATO. This is good stuff. I mean, yes, I mean, I wish it would have happened earlier, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the howitzers are there, the helicopters are going there. This feels very different than the Biden team's response to Afghanistan. They're getting a lot wrong, but they're getting this one right.
Welcome to the bandwagon, Charlie.
I'm not on the band.
I've been waving the Biden American flag on Ukraine for a while. I agree. I mean, my domestic concerns are still there, but
but you were wrong early on. I was right early on, but things have
okay. Let's come around. Let's come around till we're all right. Okay, it's come around. Everybody's right. No, they've been doing amazing. Just really quick, I think it's frustrating that he's not getting more credit for it, to be honest. I don't understand the polls on it. I just don't understand. Maybe we need to ask Sarah on her focus group podcast to do a whole focus group on this and be like, what don't you like about what's happening in Ukraine, by the way? I mean, given all of our foreign policy misadventures over the past quarter century, obviously it's not over yet. Obviously there have been horrible, tragic casualties, but as far as just our role, I just don't know how much more you could ask for. I mean, maybe a little faster on the margins, et cetera. But it's been really, really great, and yet for some reason he's not getting the credit for it.
Yeah,
and I don't really get it. I don't really get it, to be honest.
I think I do. It's because he feels like he's a background figure in our politics and our culture. I mean, a lot of us really like the idea of a president who was not in our face all the time. Remember that he actually said, "I would like to be the kind of president who you don't think about 4 days on end." Well, he got his wish because I think that's part of it. And so he has been reluctant to, put his personal stamp on it in a way. I mean, there's been no Oval Office address to the nation. I'm not exactly sure, but I do think that he's getting it right. And at the end, we're going to look back on this as a significant triumph, but it won't make a difference in the midterms. I think we know that.
Yeah.
Just ask George H.W. Bush after the Persian Gulf War. He had a 91% approval rating. He got credit for that, but then was defeated for re-election the next year, which continues to be amazing. Pretty much as amazing as Winston Churchill being defeated for re-election in 1945 after winning World War II. So just a cautionary note there. That sometimes
humans are stupid.
Well, is that when you have a success like that, people go, "That was wonderful. Let's turn the page." And we're much more concerned about this. So when you think about George H.W. Bush, I'm sure you remember this as well. I'm thinking of the images of him in 1992. It wasn't the man who presided over the victory in the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, or the Gulf War. It's the guy looking sort of puzzled at the supermarket scanner, remember? Reading the note saying, "Message, I care." You remember all that?
That's right. I do. I don't remember it because I was a child, but I've read the books and I had to listen to Jeb complain about it. I get the gist.
Yeah.
Jeb was right about that, by the way. HW got screwed.
Well, he did. But life is unfair. And this is the problem for people who think that this global triumph is somehow going to trump inflation and the shortage of baby formula and 401ks being destroyed. That's just naive. There's no history that's going to support you on that. So I mentioned that. Tim, you have a great weekend, okay?
Charlie, it was so nice to be back with you, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
I sense a little bit of bitterness about not being invited on the podcast. And I apologize for that, but could I just point out that I think I'm the only person in America who has not gotten an advance copy of your new book. You never sent me one of your books.
I was kind of figuring that you wanted, and for people who don't know, this will not. Boy, I was about to name check J-Mart's book there. That shows you where I am. Why we did it. J-Mart's book's called "This Will Not Pass." Pretty good. Why we did it. Out June 28th. I'll tell you more. We can maybe do a whole special podcast about it. Here's why I haven't sent you the book.
If you would
If you would like to read the one that still has a couple typos in there and has the soft cover and doesn't have the acknowledgments, I thought you might want a nice little pretty hard copy. I might sign a little something in there for you, write you a nice note. But if you don't want that, if you want the galley, I'll send it to you. You tell me. The galleys are ready.
I kind of want both.
Okay, we'll send you both then. So anyway, go on to Amazon.com, people. If you're still listening at the end of this podcast, pre-order it now.
Okay, on Friday we always have to talk about television. Are you a Better Call Saul fan?
So I quit Better Call Saul and I got back on it when I had COVID, which was, I know I got mad at you for not having me on the podcast, but part of the reason was let's just be honest with the listeners. I did bail on you when I had COVID, and
that's okay.
And so I had quit it because I just got a little bit bored with the brother storyline. So I just stopped watching it, and so I started back up binging it on COVID, and I'm maybe 1 or 2 episodes behind. It's excellent. I'm Breaking Bad is maybe my favorite television show of all time, so it doesn't quite live up to it for me. I know for some people they actually like Better Call Saul better. I thought Breaking Bad was just marvelous, like beginning to end, and Better Call Saul has some weak points for me. But man, it really picked back up. If you like me, quit it. Definitely get back on.
I completely agree with you. And the problem, and I actually do think that Better Call Saul is even better than Breaking Bad, although, it's a minor disagreement. See, this is the problem of, watching something like, say, The Wire or Ozark or Better Call Saul. It spoils you because it's so hard to find the next series that lives up to it. I mean, we are living in this amazing era where the quality is, I just find myself going through other shows and going, no, it's not there. No. It just doesn't have that feel to it yet.
Can I tell you the other one I'm watching during COVID?
Yeah, please.
My other COVID binge is Under the Banner of Heaven.
Oh, really?
It's really good. It's on Hulu. And I read the book 15 years ago or whenever it came out. And I'd be interested in what our Mormon listeners think, because it's obviously not a very kind portrayal of Mormonism. And I gained a newfound respect of Mormon culture in 2016 when they were like the last part of the Republican coalition to submit to Trump. They held on the longest. So there's something there. But there's an element of critique about the Mormon culture, but it also is just a very, good kind of police procedural, right? So it's combining this sort of commentary on fundamentalist Mormon culture, with a little bit of a whodunit. And it's really good. We're about halfway through the first season now.
Wow.
And Andrew Garfield is the main character. Who I love Andrew Garfield. So that would be my other recommendation for right now.
Have we ever talked about Line of Duty? Have you ever seen Line of Duty?
Mm-mm.
Okay, you have to see Line of Duty. Line of Duty is just fantastic. British police procedural.
Okay.
I would say the number one hit in Britain. The Queen watches Line of Duty. It's a little bit grim.
For the Queen.
But if you look for Line of Duty, I've recommended this over and over, and it is remarkable. There are a lot of really good ones out there, but that was another one of those. When I was done with it, I was like, damn, how am I going to?
I'll check it out. Did you ever do our other domestic police one, Mayor? I got onto Under the Banner of Heaven because my friend called it a Mormon mare, but Mayor is pretty good. It's pretty good. It is a Pennsylvania, kind of that vibe of a police thing. It was maybe out last year. I think was it Netflix? I don't remember. Mayor was really good. Under the Banner of Heaven, I'm liking better though.
Okay, I will check that out. Tim Miller, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. We will talk again next Friday. Okay.
All right. Peace out, Charlie.
The Bulwark podcast is produced by Katie Cooper with audio production by Jonathan Siri. I'm Charlie Sykes. Thank you for listening to today's Bulwark podcast, and we'll be back tomorrow. We'll do this all over again.
Just Getting Started with Susie Schuster has stories of humble beginnings and humbling moments from inspiring people. Angela Kinsey.
Listen, I was on set one day on The Office, and I was like, we were talking about what's your good side, and I said, there's nothing really to that, right? That's no, there is. And our camera operator, Matt Soam, that I'd known for 8 years, and I go, Matt, what's my side? He was like, this side. I was like, seriously? He goes, yeah. He goes, I always try to frame you that way. I was like, why didn't you tell me 7 years ago?
The new Just Getting Started with Susie Schuster. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.